Hi, I'm Roberto Martinez, and you're watching Toffee TV.
Toffee TV with me, Peter McPartland, Barry Cass, as always. And we're here and we've got a signing to talk about.
At last.
Mohamed Besic, £4 million defensive midfielder from...
Ferencváros in Hungary.
Well done. I knew that, but just making sure. Bosnian international.
Yeah.
Played in the World Cup.
He did.
People who saw him, not me, I've got to admit, said he was very, very impressive. Done a very, very good job on Messi during the Argentina game, and it's an interesting signing coming off the back of the Gareth Barry signing because they're very similar in the positions. I don't know what they're like as comparable to players, but it's interesting that he's looking to strengthen that area.
Definitely, I did notice him in the Argentina game, got to say, because he was talked about a lot. And Roberto Martinez raved about him on ESPN. In that role, people were a little bit critical, maybe that Gareth Barry, 33, not at the beginning of his career, wanted younger legs in there. I know that when we spoke about the Crystal Palace defeat last season at home, when James McCarthy was rested, we were crying out for someone who had equal legs in that position for us. So maybe he'll offer that kind of role.
Yeah.
Darren Gibson, we love as a player, but we all know that he's not the most reliable in that, in terms of injuries.
Would you think that Darren Gibson is almost the man in Barry's position, and maybe Besic is the man in McCarthy's position? So it's two players for two different positions, even though if you look at it on paper, they can be seen all as the same kind of position. There are slight differences that us mere mortals don't see, but someone like Roberto Martinez knows those little tiny percentages. And as you just said, go back to the Palace game, you can see the difference. You can see what was missing in that Palace game, and maybe having that extra player will allow this season with more games, the quality won't diminish when we need to rest players.
That's it. We're looking at two players for every position. That's what the ideal is when you talk to people, when you listen to pundits, when you listen to football men. That's the dream, isn't it, to have two players for each position? I think we're better. I think last season we tried Ross Barkley in there. I think when you put Ross in there at the moment, you take away from what he's all about, which is that kind of final third, getting on the ball, making things happen. I think he can play as a part of it too, but I think you take a lot away from Ross's game when you play him deeper. I think the likes of Besic will come in and will obviously be the legs. He will work in there. I'm not saying he can't play in there with James McCarthy and have two very hungry players. It allows you to pull Gareth Barry out. Darren Gibson, I think we love him as a footballer, but we don't know whether he's going to go through a season uninjured. Got a lot of games this season, League Cup, obviously the Europa League, FA Cup, Premier League, so there's a lot of demands on the squad. I think Roberto Martinez wants young players, doesn't he? He wants young, hungry footballers in there, and Besic's done, like you say, a fantastic job against Argentina, albeit he was left in Messi's wake for what proved to be the winning goal. But I think he's the right kind of identikit for what Martinez wants, and it's took a bit of a while to get over the line. In terms of, I think the problem nowadays with transfers is they get out a little bit too early, and people want them concluded inside of 24 hours. And I think with this one, there was a couple of clubs after him. I think a couple of issues in terms of German passports and work permits, and the need not having to go down a work permit roll has maybe held this deal up a bit longer than people had hoped. And transfers are quite difficult to get over the line. So for Everton to be able to conclude this one, probably longer than some people wanted, but the actual fact of the matter is that he's brought him in, and a really interesting signing, like you said, that the lad can also play centre half as well. So maybe
and full back as well, I believe.
You want players in them. While you don't want to start doing what the previous manager did, which is buying players and shoehorning them in other positions, it is good to know that you've got that kind of cover. We've seen James McCarthy go to right back against Aston Villa at home last season and proved very effective when he got dropped into that role. So it's obviously something that Roberto's looking at, players who can do 2 or 3 jobs.
It also helps, I think, from the point of view of if a player can play some different positions, he knows how opposition players work. Then he knows how to adapt against oppositions. You know, the great one was always a good defender could probably play up front because he knows the ins and outs of striking. So maybe that side as well. Going back to Darren,
I don't believe that, by the way.
Going back to Darren Gibson, you know, having an extra midfielder in there again, it takes the demand off him, doesn't it? Because, you know, you go back to last season, we were all sort of pinning our hopes, but I think we all sort of felt that he had all these injuries in, and we all knew that. But having 2 or 3 in there now means that there's no expectation on Darren Gibson, and maybe he can be dropped in every third game if needs be, and build up to a level where, you know, he's still relatively a young man in this game. Build to a level where we can see him more and more and more, and we've never had that before. I mean, that's the most optimistic point of view. But you know, he is a good player. We all know how well he's played for Everton in the past, and not having those demands on him, I think, is really important.
Definitely, and obviously things move on, don't they? The previous regime would fix themselves from 14 or 15 players, and that was what all the concentration and all the efforts have gone into, and it worked very well for a period of time. And I think the problem is that when we started to pick up injuries, everything else dropped off. I think this manager's come in and tried to arrest that kind of side by putting other players in. And the key then is once you move players out of that role, as you mentioned it before, you're not weakened. And I think for Darren Gibson, let's be clear, the injury that he had last season wasn't what he's had before. It was a knee injury, could have happened to anybody. You know, Aruna Kone had exactly the same kind of thing. So it's injuries that you can't always account for with Darren Gibson. The thigh caused him a problem, and hopefully he's got over that now, and hopefully he's over the knee injury and able to build on it. So he's very good footballer, Gibson, and it's good to be able to call on him off the bench or put him in there for certain games. But the thing is, if he does break down, we've got other players. Rather than just looking and saying who's going to play in there now, there's a natural fit to go in there.
But it's so important, isn't it? You come off the back of those Sunday Europa, the Thursday Europa games, you go into that Sunday, and to have a couple of different players maybe to fill in. You have a partnership on the Thursday, and then you have a different partnership on a Sunday, and that can be so big, because we've seen Spurs last year struggle when they played that Thursday game, going into that Sunday game against a team that were a little bit fresher, got at them early. Maybe to have a couple of fresh players to go in there, that makes such a big difference in what is a really important part of the pitch.
Definitely, and that legs are important. We used to suffer when we'd have Leon Osman and, say, Phil Neville in there at times. Although Osman's quality on the ball is excellent, he didn't have the legs. Phil Neville played in there 2 years too long, really, so we'd get often overrun by younger, hungry players. And I think for us to be able to have that opportunity to put two fresh midfielders in there to try and kind of cope with those demands is a really good point. I think the other thing it allows you to do is, if Everton are able to get the qualification quickly with that Europa League, when you go into those away games, you're able to take, say, a Darren Gibson and a Mohamed Besic over there and top that up with a Ryan Ledson and a Tyus Browning on the bench. It enables you to say to Gareth Barry, you sit back, we've got a big game Sunday, you sit back, stay at home, James McCarthy maybe, you stay at home, we're going to go with these two. And we're not going out there saying, we've got a weakened team here. We're going out there saying, right, this is the midfield partnership for tonight. You don't want to get in the habit of doing that all the time, because your team never gets any rhythm. And I think the reason why Everton was so good last season was we were able to, in that middle central area of the park, we were able to play those players the majority of the time.
But it makes more of a difference, won't it, if those players are playing a little bit more often? Because we go back to that Crystal Palace game again. The reason that sort of did fall apart that game was because it was experimental. It'd never been done before. We'd had James McCarthy for the majority of the season, and suddenly you're pulling him out in a really important game. Whereas if there are different partnerships, then if they're getting used during the season, there will be more of a rhythm rather than just dragging one player out for one game. Also, when Gareth Barry went out in games, you know, when we missed him against Manchester City, we've seen how important that was. Yeah. I mean, obviously that can't happen this season, but if you do miss him, then if you can put someone else in there who's playing more often, then there's not going to be such a big shock, and it's not going to be such a big problem. Going on to Gareth Barry, I mean, he's secured now 3 years. Some people will see that maybe as a year too long, but you know, the manager's got maximum faith in this player and believes that for 3 years, whether he's playing, you know, nearly every game like he did last season, or, you know, maybe playing less games as those 3 years go on, it's always going to be a massive influence on the team and on the squad.
Definitely, and he's touched upon that already in his interviews that he's spoken about, how big the presence is around the club. Gareth Barry was fantastic last season, and we spoke a little bit about it on one of the previous videos of the need to try and keep him because it's not introducing someone new into that role. Say, for instance, he hadn't signed and we brought in Mohamed Besic, expecting Besic to go in there and perform at Gareth Barry's level immediately, almost say if Gibson wasn't fit. And we don't need to do that now. We can say, look, you come and sit on the bench. This is the master at this role. I think the way I see it with Gareth Barry, he brings so much professionalism to the club. He helps the likes of the development with the likes of Ledson, the younger kids as well. He also helps McCarthy out. He'll help Besic out. He'll help Ross Barkley. You're not just getting one facet with Barry, you're getting a lot. And I've said it before and I still maintain it. I'll be surprised if he finishes the 3-year contract at Everton. I can see him maybe having to move to America kind of at the end of the second year. But it's important to get him. Roberto Martinez wanted him. The club have gone out and got him. And it's a big signing for Everton in terms of if we'd allowed him to go somewhere else, it would have been, in my opinion, one of those where you're looking back thinking, he really should have been here. You know, people spoke last year about when Gareth Barry goes back and when Romelu Lukaku goes back, Everton won't be the same. And we might end up with both of those players. So Barry's already in and done and dusted. And for me, that's it. That was a big sign. And I'm feeding off that. Mohamed Besic has come in and I'm starting to now move in the right direction, I think.
Right, Barry Cass, he's McPartland. You've been watching Toffee TV. Don't forget, Twitter at ToffeeTV1. Subscribe on YouTube.
Subscribe on YouTube, Toffee TV channel.
Toffee TV. It's all there. Get it, subscribe, get the numbers up.
Tell your mates.
We'll be back soon.